Okay, my machine says that I've started recording. So how's everybody doing? I hope well. We're lucky we still don't have any kind of summer weather yet. So welcome to Seattle style weather. So to let you know, we've this is the ninth week. So this is our last video lesson. I'm gonna try to let you guys go a little early today. One last question. Only one story today about one individual, but he's so wild and interesting that it's better than two. So again, this will be our ninth lesson, and it will be scheduled for June the 5th. So let me proceed to my usual routine. Share the screen, go to the material, slideshow. Okay, and then now from the beginning, hit this until we get lined up here. All right, so again, school code HUM 105, the intimate lives of the world's most famous artists. Like I said, this is our last lesson for the quarter, week 9. Let's get into it. So here's a picture of a young Salvador Dali. You will see he doesn't change all that much, except for maybe a little more crazy as he gets older. But this is him as a young man. So here we go with his name. Remember, Spanish people tend to have long names. They have their parents, their father's name, and then the mother's name. Sometimes use the grandfather's name. And so here we go. Salvador Domingo Felipe Jacinto Dali y Domenech. Then we have another name, Marquez of Dali of Pubol. These are more honorific titles. Was born May 11th, 1904, and died January the 23rd, 1989. So almost the 1990s there. And I think some of you were born in the 90s. So known as Salvador Dali, and that's in the Catalan dialect of Spanish, was a Spanish surrealist artist renowned for his technical skill, precise draftsmanship, and the striking and bizarre images in his work. So I mentioned a little bit a couple of artists ago about surrealism. Uh, Surrealistic things aren't really real. They have a basis in reality, but they're presented in a surreal or strange way. One of his uh, most famous paintings is of a melted clock. Now, it hasn't melted into just a pound of gold, but it's still a functioning clock. So you see the hands and the numbers kind of like squiggly wiggly there, but it's a very famous and cool painting. So again, he was renowned, which means very famous or world famous for his technical skill, precise, exact craftsmanship, and striking and bizarre images of the world. So again, if you don't know bizarre, striking doesn't mean it hits you, but physically, but it hits you visually because you say, I've never seen a melted clock or strange animals that look like straws now walking in the desert. And they're also what is considered bizarre, right? Kind of like things you might see in a science fiction book. It's way ahead of his time. Okay, so born in Figueres, Catalonia, Spain, Dalí received his formal education, fine arts in Madrid, which is the capital of Spain, I think. No? Or is it Barcelona? Okay. Influenced by Impressionism. So we talked about Impressionism before. And we also spoke about the Renaissance period, like the Dutch Renaissance. masters. From a young age, he became increasingly attracted to Cubism. If you remember our stories, the person that's most famous for Cubism is Pablo Picasso, who we discovered earlier. And then avant-garde movements, right? He moved closer to surrealism in the late 1920s, so that means he didn't start with that kind of style, right? He again was involved in his trainings were in Impressionism and Renaissance. Was attracted to Cubism, which would probably lead you to surrealism because it's almost surrealistic itself. And he joined the surrealistic group in 1929, soon becoming one of its leading exponents. So exponents means people who are working in that field or excelling in the field. His best known work, The Persistence of Memory, was completed in August 1931 and is one of the most famous surrealistic. So, not only one of his most famous, but one of the world's most famous surrealistic paintings. Dali lived in France throughout the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, before leaving for the United States in 1940, where he achieved commercial success. So, like a lot of artists, they work and struggle for many years and don't get any commercial success until later. Most after they die, but he got his success before, but it was not at an early time. Uh, he returned to Spain in 1948, where he announced his return to the Catholic faith, developed his nuclear mysticism style based on his interest in classicism, mysticism, which is sick, and recent scientific developments. Pretty interesting fellow there. Wonder his artwork is also interesting or even bizarre. Dali's artistic repertoire, that's a French word, which means, like, if you have a repertoire, sometimes it sneaks into, like, I'll make it easy for the guys here, okay? In, like, say, basketball terms, right? They'll say, oh, this basketball player, his repertoire, which means his excellent skills, high level skills, he's a great 3-point shooter. He's also a great ball handler. So repertoire means more than one. So same thing, at least 2 skills, usually more. So he's a great 3-point shooter. He's a great ball handler. He's good assist man. So there's 3 right there, right? So Dali's artistic repertoire included painting, 1, graphic arts, 2, film, 3, sculpture, 4, design and photography, 5, 6, at times in collaboration with other artists. He worked with other artists. He also wrote fiction, poetry, autobiography, essays, and criticism. Major themes in his work include dreams, the subconscious, sexuality, religion, science, and his closest personal relationships. To the dismay of those who held his work in high regard, dismay it's a negative term. So it describes how the most basic I can put it is it describes like an unhappiness. So it's a word that I have not seen in quite a while. People used to use it. Let's say grandmother would say, "Oh, much to my dismay, my grandson has begun to smoke marijuana. So again, it's an unhappiness. She's not happy that her grandson started to smoke marijuana. So the people who liked him, unfortunately, they were not happy. And to the irritation of his critics, his eccentric and ostentatious public behavior often drew more attention than his artwork. So let me see if I can put that in a nutshell for you. Okay. I will compare him to, make it easy, let's say Michael Jackson. Okay. So Dali had fans that loved his artwork. Okay. They loved it. But, okay, so the same for Michael Jackson. People loved his singing and dancing. But his behaviors with masks, having his best friend was a chimpanzee, uh, sleeping in an electric lung, whether it was to give him fresh oxygen, I'm not sure. Hanging around with children all the time instead of adults, people his own age. That bothered some people, even though they loved his work. So, same thing with Salvador Dali. So their feeling was kind of like, can you just do your art? It's really interesting. But as you'll see, when we find out the strange way he lived his life, always wanting attention and doing the craziest things. So for some people, that can stop them from supporting his work because this guy's just lifestyle is just crazy. Okay. So his public support for the Francois regime, which I won't get into, but that was the Franco regime during the Spanish War. His commercial activities and the quality and authenticity of some of his late works have also been controversial. His life and work were an important influence on other surrealists, pop art, and contemporary artists such as Jeff Koons and Damien Hirst. There are two major museums devoted to Salvador Dali's work. The Dali Theater Museum in Figueres, Spain, where he was born, and the Salvador Dali Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida. Okay, so let's get into his early life here. The Dali family in 1910 from the upper left. So Aunt Maria Teresa, mother, father, Salvador Dali, the little boy right here. Kind of strange for me to see him without a mustache. And Caterina, who became the second wife of his father, Olga. Sister Ana Maria, and that's his little sister. And then grandmother Anna. And then this is me in the boat over here. I'm rowing aimlessly, running away from sharks. Okay. All right. Salvador Dali was born 11th of May, 1904 at 8:45 a.m. How do they even know that? Man, believe on the first floor of the Carrer Monturiol, 20 in the town of Figueres in the Emporda region, close to the French border in Catalonia, Spain. Okay, and remember, they speak a different dialect of Spanish. They will tell you they're different people, they're Catalonians. Okay, Dali's older brother, who had also been named Salvador, born October 12th, 1901, had died of gastroenteritis, so an internal disease, 9 months earlier, August 1st, 1903. His father, Salvador Luca Rafael Aniceto Dali, Cusi, born 1872 and lived until 1950, was a middle-class lawyer and notary. And if you don't know what a notary is, it doesn't mean they're notoriously famous. It's these people, if you guys in the United States, you need some kind of official document for the government, right? It's not enough that you sign it. You have to go to a special person. They have their own business. They will come and verify. So a notary is like like a professional witness. They'll give their official stamp and they can be investigated to prove that they are who they are, and they'll say, I'm an official. You can go, hey, my buddy Pete and his girlfriend Yo-Yo, you know, they verify my information. No, you have to go to a notary, pay them a little money. And so again, was a notary and an anti-clerical atheist, so did not believe in religion or the church. And Catalan federalist, so it's very strong. If you know anything about the politics in Spain, I think the Catalan people are trying to break away from Spain and actually have their own area. I don't know what they call it, a state or a province, and you have it declared. So for that, and whose strict disciplinary approach was tempered or offset by his wife, Felipa Domenech Perez, born 1870 and died 1901, and who encouraged her son's artistic endeavors or adventures. In the summer of 1912, the family moved to the top floor of Carrer Montreal 24, presently 10, not really important. These are different numbers. I'm not familiar. These are like European type of apartments. So I'm not sure if that means 24th floor or unit 24. It has now become unit 10. I've never lived in a place like that. Dali later attributed his love of everything that is gilded and excessive, passion for luxury, and my love of Oriental clothes to an Arab lineage, claiming that his ancestors were descendants of the Moors. Their history, the Moors in Spain, I think they were there for 500 years. So this is it. My line originally past the Spanish goes back to the Moors. So he loved luxury, Oriental clothes. It's a term that's kind of disappearing. Now we have the all-encompassing Asian. Even Asian people before were called Oriental. That was what's maps. It was called the Far East or the Orient. Right? The only place I might see it now is there's a few furniture stores that still say we sell Oriental furniture. Okay? And the Arab lineage, of course, that he's talking about is two Moors that came from underneath Spain, came through up to Spain, conquered Spain many years ago. So very interesting stuff. Dali was haunted by the idea of his dead brother throughout his life, mythologizing him in his writings and art. I guess he dreamt a lot about his dead brother. And when you mythologize someone, it's kind of like you keep their spirit alive, and it helps, make them famous. So people, it's usually here in the United States, it's usually, again, like his brother, they died young, but the people kept them in the media in so many forms. So people like in the United States that have been mythologized. Elvis Presley just had another movie about him recently on Netflix. Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, more recently Bruce Lee. So all these folks died at a relatively young age. But you see so much of them in the media that it seems like they never died, right? And I guess that's what he wanted to do. He didn't like to accept the fact that that's the way. Dali said of him, we resembled each other like two drops of water, but we had different reflections. He was probably the first version of myself, but conceived too much in the absolute. So look at the way he spoke. Even his speaking was bizarre, strange, different, luxurious, you know. So how do you explain something like that? He was probably the first version of myself. Okay, that's pretty easy, you know, twins feel like that. But conceive too much in the absolute, meaning just like he was just so much a regular person. But of course, me, Dali, I'm just wild and out there. Maybe that's what he meant there. Images of his brother would reappear in his later works, including Portrait of My Dead Brother. That's pretty well titled there. Hmm. Dali also had a sister, Ana Maria, who was 3 years younger. In 1949, she published a book about her brother Dali as seen by his sister. Like I said, as he came to the United States and became famous, it was so famous that people wanted to read about him from his own sister. So maybe one of uh, one of you guys can do that. Let's say it's reversed. Let's say you have a wild and famous sister, and she really doesn't feel like doing her autobiography as of yet. So you, as her boyfriend, or I'm sorry, boyfriend, you're her brother. Maybe you can. She'll give you the okay, and you can write a book about it, as seen by her brother. His childhood friends included future FC Barcelona footballers Emili Sagi Barba and Josep Samitier. During holidays at the Catalan resort town of uh, Cadaqués, the trio played football together. So now we know that Dali also participated in some sports, which I hadn't heard of before. Dali attended the municipal drawing school at Figueres, so he did have artistic training, and that was in 1916 before World War I had finished, and also discovered modern painting on a summer vacation trip to Cadaqués with the family of Ramon Pichot, a local artist who made regular trips to Paris. Um, the next year, Dali's father organized an exhibition of his charcoal drawings in their family home. He had his first public exhibition at the Municipal Theater in Figueres in 1918, a site he would return to decades later. Early 1921, the Pichot family introduced Dali to Futurism. That same year, Dali's uncle Anselm Domenech, who owned a bookshop in Barcelona, supplied him with books and magazines on Cubism and contemporary art. And that's probably where he got his intro into Cubism and started to really enjoy it. Okay. Let me continue here. On February 6, 1921, Dali's mother died of uterine cancer. She had cancer, uterus. Dali was 16 years old and later said his mother's death was the greatest blow or pain I had experienced in my life. I worshipped her. I could not resign myself to the loss of a being on whom I counted to make invisible the unavoidable blemishes of my soul. Again, look at this man's writing. It's unbelievable. the unavoidable blemishes of my soul. So obviously referring to mistakes he had made, imperfections in his own personality, felt that he had. And I guess if these pained him as a person, his mother comforting him somehow took them away, right? And now she was gone. So, yeah. After the death of Dali's mother, Dali's father married her sister. Hmm. Dali did not resent this marriage because he had a great love and respect for his aunt. I guess if he didn't, he would be upset and saying, "Why are you marrying mom's sister?" But he loved her a lot, so and respected her. Interesting. So here's a drawing of him in like I've described in prior pictures with the other artists. They're all displaying things. So we will find out this animal is not a leopard, not a cheetah. There's no spots. These are long, different types of markings. It is a ocelot. So we will discover, why is there an ocelot? All these paintings describe things, their life, like what we've talked about, Georgia O'Keeffe, right? And then you'll see, what is he doing with this really long piece of French bread? You know, here's the melted clock that I talked about before. Why is he holding these paintings? Who is the lady that he has in his necklace, right? Why are these cupboard drawers coming out of his pants? The flamboyant luxurious jacket. And then you'll see his unique style mustache, which he waxed, right? And then the wild, unkept hair. So we will get into those things at the present. If we read from the top, let me get my pointer here. How to shock the world every 24 hours. And that's definitely what he tried to do in his mature life, which was to try and shock the world. Salvador Dali, again, born 1904, died 1989. So what is that? 85 years. Okay. Flamboyant Spanish painter, famous for putting his dreams and nightmares, probably should say especially nightmares, into realistic paintings. That's bizarre. So flamboyant means kind of shiny and bright kind of style. If it was just clothes, he also had a wild style in the way he lived life, which we will undoubtedly read about here. Okay. So here we go with a very egotistical statement. Nothing is more important to me than me. Salvador Dali wrote, and with his glittering, that's a good word for flamboyant, stare, which I don't know how you make a glittering stare, and fits of mad laughter, so he would just laugh uncontrollably sometimes. And why? Who knows? He dedicated his life to proving his genius. So some people, whatever field, music, acting, what have you, say, oh yeah, I'm a genius, right? And they just kind of coast along. But he took it upon himself to say, I think I'm a genius in my type of art, and brother, I'm going to prove it. So kind of a different approach there. He was frequently expelled from school, once for telling 3 professors he knew more about art than all of them put together. How would you like that? You're some young kid, or what they would call on the street a young punk. You're telling your 3 older, mature professors that have more years in art training, art experience than you have alive, and you're telling them, you guys know nothing. I know more than all of you put together. That's pretty wild. You're gonna have to prove that. Maybe he did. I don't know how good of artists they were, but obviously um, they didn't become as famous as him. Okay. Gala, a much older Russian woman whose real name was Helena and who was married to someone else, she suddenly decided to dedicate her life to Dali as well and became his sole model and assistant. So you might ask a question like that. How's that possible? She's married to someone else and she was older, so you would guess more mature. Suddenly decided to dedicate her life to Dali as well and become his sole model and assistant. So how I'll explain that to you is that some people have such a strong charisma that it just uh, overcomes other people. I'm sure she wasn't the only one that was overcome by his charisma, but she's the one who divorced her husband and not only just like, let's say, fall in love with him, but to dedicate her life to Dali. Some people have this capability. So it's like sometimes men can see a woman that is so beautiful, they suddenly become children. They're willing to give her or spend as much money on her as she would like, even if it be not in their best interest, a little foolish, right? But with Ali, it was his charisma. With a woman I'm talking about, it could be like a beautiful movie star. It's her beauty. So these things happen in life when other people stand there with more common sense and say, "What are you doing? What's going on?" They happen. So Dali, liked her because she changed clothes 3 times a day. And at each meeting, he discovered her anew. So I think that's interesting to get into. Again, let me give you a new word here. It's called quirky. Quirky. Quirky is not eccentric, but it's a person who has maybe strange or unique views on things, right? And Dali was 1000% quirky individual. So listen to this statement. Um, he didn't say that he just saw her and fell for her beauty, but being a quirky individual, liking the strangest things that for most people you cannot really explain sufficiently. She happened to change clothes 3 times a day, and maybe with his artistic mind, it's like seeing 3 different kinds of paintings or works of art in one day. So he liked that. So my guess is that if she did not change 3 times a day and only once, he might not have been that interested in her. Isn't that interesting? Again, quirky man, and we will find out more quirks as we go along. After her divorce and their marriage, so she married him. They lived in poverty at first, but dreading the neighbors' pity, which means they were really, really over worried that people would have pity for them. Look how poor they lived. So to fight this, they left large tips in restaurants. Okay, so people thought, oh, they do have a lot of money, but they just decide to live, you know, in a poor house, right? That's what they decide to. spend their money on. So things can go in reverse on things like this. I can give you a personal experience of mine from I don't know if this still goes on, but many, many years ago when I first started teaching in Koreatown, uh, it was explained to me uh, that a lot of young Korean guys at the time, like I said, I don't know if this continues, but they would drive around these expensive cars in BMWs. And the point was, the most important thing to them, which was explained to me, is they wanted other Koreans, Koreatown, to see them as being successful and that they had a lot of money. Obviously, if some young guy's 24, 25, and he's driving around in a brand new BMW, he's got some kind of money. But they told me, well, teacher, secretly, the guy lives in the car and he has friends that he goes and takes showers at, what have you. So he lives in the car, parks at his friend's garage, sleeps there, and then drives around during the day, and people think, wow, that guy's a success. So at least he looks the part until he becomes financially successful. That's why I'm comparing this to Salvador Dali. So since later, when his paintings were selling for $1 million each, and you can imagine that was in the 30s, 40s, 50s. How about $1 million then compared to now? Wow. He was eating oysters, which have always been expensive, with princes, so princes from all over the world. Dali made sure his old friends still living on sardines and bread crust knew it. So what that means is he wanted to make sure that some of his old friends who were still living in poverty, he wanted them to be jealous. Like, see, look at me now, baby. You know, look what I'm doing. And then here's a really interesting, which again, I've seen to be a common trait amongst really quirky and eccentric famous people. Dali did not excel at ordinary life. So again, I go back to the Michael Jackson example. He also did not excel at your regular life, everyday living, because he liked to, again, sleep in an iron lung, uh, walk around with a chimpanzee, wear masks, hang around with children. So he lived an eccentric lifestyle with the money that provided him. The same with Dali. I don't think Dali could have just actually lived a normal life and not sought publicity. You will see how much he wanted to be famous and in people's, news every day. Okay. So he was notorious, which means famous in a negative way. A criminal is famous, but notoriously famous, not for doing good things, but maybe robbing banks. But he was notorious for not knowing how to count money, which is also how many famous people, super famous. We won't say Michael Jackson this time, even though that happened to him too, but Mike Tyson don't know how to count money. So doesn't matter the millions and millions that Mike Tyson made as a boxing world champion. His lifestyle, not trying to have the correct assets, saving for the future, led him to bankruptcy. I don't think Dali went bankrupt, but he just was not careful with his money. The only transportation that didn't petrify him, so petrify means severely scare you. Real, like some people are petrified of going to the ocean because of sharks. Was a taxi. So he liked taxis, but I guess he himself refused to drive. So similar to when we had Picasso, if you remember the term, which the question might be on the final next week. Picasso, you remember what Picasso said about driving? It's not good for an artist's wrist to drive. He's just trying to be funny there. There's another quirk. Dali was afraid to expose his feet. And this was a problem when he went shopping for a shoe. Uh, I would think he'd just have to wear socks. You know, just didn't want people to see his feet. Very interesting. To ward off or keep away evil spirits, he carried a special piece of driftwood, which is like a piece of wood that you've caught from the ocean. It drifts onto the beach and you pick it up. But nevertheless, his fears increased. So even though he thought maybe ghosts and evil spirits were everywhere, he carried the special driftwood, but it didn't stop his fears from increasing. He was afraid of germs. A lot of famous people are afraid of germs and will refuse to shake your hands. They wash their hands many, many times a day. In the past, like when a young guy, it was the famous Howard Hughes, he was at one time the richest man in the world. And then most recently, I think, what is it? The America's Got Talent show, the bald-headed fellow, the ex-comedian Howie Mandel. He is also what they call a germ freak, and he will refuse to shake your hands and does not like to get close to people because he's always worried about things being dirty and him getting sick from some germs. Okay. He was also afraid of assassination. I guess real famous people are always afraid that someone's going to try and kill them. It said he had his chauffeur taste his food. So this makes me think of like old Roman times or even ancient China with the emperors. I guess many of these high-ranking people had been poisoned and killed by people sneaking poison into the kitchens. So they would have what is an official taster. They would say, I'm paying you, and your job is to taste my food. And if you don't die, then I can eat. I guess a lot of those people die. So in Dali's more uh, common, more recent style, he asked the chauffeur, "Please taste my food, and I hope that you don't die." I don't know if I would want that job. So, and he was also very afraid of grasshoppers. Um, a lot of people are very afraid of insects. Very afraid. I'm not that afraid of them as long as they're at a distance, but I would not pick up a grasshopper or other insects and try to hold it in my hands and rub it. I have no interest in that since they move faster than I do, and some of them bite, and I just no thank you. But I guess even if he saw a grasshopper, he was like, "Oh my God," would lose it. Um, and he was so scared. I can do that. In fact, I like walking on grass. He was so terrified that he never walked on grass because he was afraid of grasshoppers. When traveling, he would know to attach his canvases, so that's why in the picture he's carrying his paintings to his body with strings for fear of theft. So now we know why. So that's before. I'll tell you the more modern version. He thought people were going to steal his stuff, so he tied, I guess, strong string around them and tied them to his body. The modern version is people have something valuable. I don't know whether it's a diamond or what have you, and they'll put it in a suitcase. Then, like the police have handcuffs, they'll put one handcuff on the suitcase and one on their wrist. Right. That was his old style way of trying to protect his paintings, which If his paintings are going for $1 million each, he might have $2 million he's carrying on himself because that's what they were worth. All right, so we're right here in the middle. Dali lived life like an animated cartoon Dali painting, explaining the only difference between Dali himself and a crazy man is that Dali is not crazy. That's very funny. But hey, look at that crazy guy over there. I'm the same. That's my style, but I'm not crazy. Okay. He wore his mustache in the exaggerated style of his idol, the Spanish artist Velázquez, waxing, so putting wax on the ends to hold up a curl. So he would do that every day. He would leap into the air to get himself noticed. Once drove around in a white Rolls Royce filled to the roof with cauliflower. Okay. Now, I guess as a young man, that's when he did his jumping or leaping into the air just so that people would notice him. And then I don't know what kind of person fills your expensive Rolls Royce with either broccoli or cauliflower or lettuce, and you drive around so people can point at you and go, "Hey, look at that wild guy with all the cauliflower in his car." But he wanted attention. When he attended a party where guests were dressed to dress up as their dreams, he came as a decomposing corpse. So I'm sure people came, "Oh, I dreamt I was an angel," or "I dreamt I was a flower," or "I dreamt I was a rich man." He came as a dead body that was rotting. What better way to get all the attention that you can, right? But in a strange, bizarre, surrealistic way. To greet reporters who met his ship, so he had a ship, he persuaded the ship's baker to make him an 8 foot long, 8 foot, not 2, 3 foot, loaf of French bread he could wave about. So again, when you have a long piece of French bread like a pool cue and you wave it around, obviously you're going to get noticed, right? Nobody can miss you. But we can see here he was an attention seeker, right? Always wanting attention, not only for his art. So these are the things that we talked about earlier, where people said, "Love your art. It's the most unique thing I've ever seen." But this thing about jumping in the street and coming as a dead body, 8 foot long bread, driving through the streets of downtown with your car filled with cauliflower, we don't like these things. Would you please stop these things? Right? So it says here, which is very important, no amount of publicity was too much. I've been told now, like, well, let's go with the modern famous people. Like, let's say it's a reverse psychology kind of thing. I'm sure everyone's famous with Kim Kardashian and the Kardashian family. She'll get upset that paparazzi are taking shots of her at the beach, shopping Rodeo Drive. But yet, I'm told that she will pay to call paparazzi at different times when she's ready, wearing her new outfit or walking her kids or being with someone famous, and she'll pay them to come. She'll let them know, "I'm at this restaurant in Santa Monica, so please come at 4 o'clock and take as many pictures of me as you want," because she wants those pictures done. So similar to Dali in his time, no publicity, too much. Continuing here on the top right, shortly after landing on the cover of Time magazine, which was very, very big at the time. Yeah, Time was big at the time, right? Aha. Dali was arrested for smashing the window of a department store that had dared to change a display he had designed. Right? So again, very, very upset. "Okay, I'll design this thing for you." And I guess they changed it in some small way and he broke the window. He couldn't handle it. Another day, he donned or put on a deep sea diving suit. That's what he's wearing here. Then you could see the melted feet there, surrealistic, and a giant grasshopper. Um, and he put this on before he gave a lecture. So imagine you're waiting to see this famous person come and get a lecture, and then they put on a diving suit. You can't even see their face. So what's going on here? It's like last night I saw the America's Got Talent. Some guy came out wearing an inflatable dinosaur outfit, so you couldn't see what he looked like, or if it was a woman or a man, and jumped around. So that's Dali. Not only was the heavy helmet soundproof, so he couldn't hear anything inside that helmet. No one could hear him either, but no one noticed he was suffocating, so he was running out of oxygen. So again, a foolish person looking for publicity over his own safety. So the audience didn't know, so they thought he was acting, being silly, so they started laughing, which means roaring like a lion with laughter. The laughter was so strong. So only eccentric people get into these kinds of situations, not regular people. Me. Okay, so these people, again, the laughing audience there thought his gestures for help were meant to be funny, so they even thought he was joking. They didn't believe it. And not until he almost fainted was he rescued. He was accused of going too far, running things way beyond the limit. And typical Dali would reply, going too far? It's the only place I wanted to go. So, wow. But again, it's like saying, are you crazy? Crazy? Crazy is good. Or he would say with a sigh is, ah, it's very difficult to shock the world every 24 hours. But I guess that's what his goal was, to do it. I can't imagine this guy being in the present time with the social media that we have now. It's unbelievable. He was mostly doing this before there was even television. So no cell phones. They can't make a movie about him all the time. No TV, no internet, and somehow he still was able to do it. So what's available to him now? Oh my gosh. He probably could shock the world 24 hours. He wintered in New York, where he would dine on duck liver and raisins. Liver's very expensive. With 30 of his closest friends, preferably beautiful ones. He only liked hanging out with beautiful people. So that might be for that term. I used to hear it a lot when I was in high school. When they'd say, "Oh, these movie stars always go to this restaurant. It's only for movie stars." I would say, "Yes, the beautiful, not the regular schmoes like myself." So he would go with these 30 closest friends and then one or two ocelots. So those are the cats that we saw. They are wild, they're not wild cats. They're like a leopard or a cheetah, but they're smaller, different markings. He summered at a fisherman's hut in Spain, where a stuffed polar bear at the door held umbrellas and where meals were simple, fresh fish and salads of tomatoes. Eventually, Gala moved to an 11th century castle Dali had lovingly restored for her, where he was allowed to visit only if he asked her in advance writing. Can you believe that? I mean, don't you like it's Sunday morning and you want to be with your woman? Why they're not living together, I don't know. And then you just come over and say, "Darling, I missed you. Let's have breakfast." It's like, no, I'm going to write you a letter. And how many days does that take to get to her? And then she has to write a letter and say yes. It's on. Again, quirky. He moved in on the night she died. So entombed her, which means buried her in the castle crypt, and prepared his grave next to hers. He lived his last 7 years in the castle as a recluse, taken care of by his manservant Arturo and 4 round-the-clock nurses. Okay. I was trying to think about this, like what craziness. Why wasn't, I mean, you marry a person, why don't you live with them, right? And then this thing of writing letters, waiting days, even though you want to see her right now. So it just came into my mind what I read earlier about why did he decide to marry her? Because she changed her clothes 3 times a day. So he's not going to be one that's going to, like, let's say our regular style where, oh, my wife, we didn't go anywhere today and she hung around all day in sweats and an old t-shirt. Not for him. So I guess this is another way of seeing her really, really new all the time with different clothes. So that was really important to him. So finally he says, geniuses must never die. He promised. So I guess he was trying to convince himself that he would not die. So I'm a genius and I can't die. But in fact, he did at the age of 84, which we all do, no matter how many famous people think with the best doctors. And as you can see, he had 4 nurses around the clock, think that they'll never die. We're all human. Doesn't matter rich or poor, famous or not famous, we all die. Okay? Let's go on to a small thing of artworks. One night, Dali, pleading a headache, backed out of going to the movies with Gala and her friends. He sat for a long time at the dinner table, staring at the melting camembert cheese. Before he went to bed, he took a last look at a landscape he was working on and suddenly added 3 melting watches, the one that I spoke about, thus creating the entitled The Persistence of Memory, probably his most famous painting. I used to have a tie that was a representation of that piece of work. I really liked it. Okay, next, Daddy Longlegs of the Evening. ... Hope. Dali's first work to sell, The Morse Family of St. Petersburg, Florida, sold so early in his career that the frame cost more than the painting. Wow, that's wild. Dali's paintings were thought scandalous by the Morse's friends, but the family ended up buying 1/4 of Dali's entire output. Wow, 25%. And established a Dali museum. They even published the Dali Primer, a guide to the way he spoke English, which was so eccentric that not even English speakers could understand it. Again, so that word, like I used for Michael Jackson, keeps on popping up. Accent. Another like common now is like Lady Gaga's pretty accent. She showed up at one Academy Awards wearing a dress made of sliced meat. Another time she showed up inside of a giant egg. She didn't know what was in there. So she emerged. Very eccentric and quirky stuff. Okay, on to the questions. That means the reading is finished. So question 1, what did Salvador Dali dedicate his life to proving? It's pretty self-explanatory. 2, who was Helena and what did she do for Dali? What did Dali not excel at? We know he excelled at paintings, drawings, writings, movies, different things, but what did he not excel at? What was he not good at? 4, what kind of Rolls Royce did Dali once drive around in? What kind was it? Am I trying to trick you here? Was it a pink Rolls Royce? What kind was it? 5, Dali once went to a dream party dressed as what? Was he dressed as a sausagey? Was he dressed as a can of beer, a clown? What was he dressed? 6, what was Dali arrested for? Was it a bank robber, shoplifter, What was he arrested for? 7, when he was accused of going too far, what did Dali reply? Sorry, maybe. 8, when Dali dined in New York, who and what dined with him? So these are two categories. Who meaning the people and what? I'll let you figure that one out. 9, where and how did he live his last 7 years? Okay, good stuff. Stop share. All right, so we're back here at the beginning, which is now the end. So everybody take care. This is the last lesson for the quarter. Next, we will have a test. So I will see you soon, right? Take care.